My husband left me a garage and a goodbye note. But what I found behind that locked door nearly destroyed 3 powerful men. My name is Melissa Grant, and if you told me 6 months ago that I'd be standing inside a garage I had never seen holding a key my husband never let me touch, I would have laughed. Back then, I believed in things like shared lives, honest love, and Sunday dinners at 6 p.m. sharp. I believed in the kind of marriage you read about in magazines, polished, peaceful, perfectly normal. But what if I told you that everything you think you know about your partner, your life, could fall apart with one turn of a key? Because that's exactly what happened to me. It started on a Thursday just after dusk. The sky outside our house in Eugene, Oregon was brushed in watercolor pinks, and the teacups on our kitchen table were still warm. I had just taken almond cookies out of the oven, his favorite. I remember checking the clock. 6:59 p.m. On any other Thursday, he'd be walking through the door, undoing his tie, and giving me that familiar half smile that said, "We made it through another week." But this time, there was no key in the lock. No footsteps. Just silence. That was the moment I knew. Grief is strange. It doesn't arrive all at once. It creeps in. First with the missed calls. Then the knock at the door. Then the words too formal and too practiced. "There was an accident. We're so sorry." That night, I sat at our kitchen table staring at the untouched teacups, trying to figure out how to breathe again. There were no children to distract me, no comforting noises, just the ticking of the clock and the echo of absence. His funeral was a blur of polite nods and people I barely knew offering stories about a man I thought I understood. My best friend Lindsay kept placing a glass of water in my hands like hydration could keep the truth from sinking in. My sister Julia flew in from Denver, arriving late as always, her perfume too sweet and her hugs too rehearsed. "You're strong," she said, voice sugar-coated. "He adored you, Mel. You were everything to him." I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe that. But a few nights later, I found it. Or rather, I found them. His keys. Still resting in the small ceramic bowl by the hallway mirror. The same bowl I'd emptied and dusted for years. The same keys he always carried but never shared. Among the familiar jingling steel was one key that didn't match the others, a flat matte gray key with a square head and faint numbers etched on the side. I had seen it before. Once. Maybe twice. When I asked about it, he said, "Just storage, honey. Rusty stuff. Not worth your time." And I believed him. Because that's what trust looks like, right? You don't question the people you love. You don't invade the quiet spaces they've claimed as their own. But when love dies, so do the rules. So I drove, past the river, through the aging industrial zone where broken windows stared like hollow eyes. Past all the places that made me wonder what secrets a man could tuck away beneath rust and concrete. And I found it. An old garage. Peeling white paint. A corrugated steel roof sagging under the weight of moss and years. I parked my car and sat there for a full 10 minutes. My hands trembled when I held the key. My mind screamed reasons to leave. But I opened the door anyway. If you've ever found yourself at the edge of a truth you didn't ask for, let me know in the comments. I'd like to believe I'm not the only one who's been blindsided by the people they trusted most. And if you're still here watching, maybe, just maybe this story was meant for you too. Because what I saw behind that door, it wasn't storage. It wasn't tools. It was the beginning of the end. And it changed everything. The light flickered overhead as I stepped into the garage, and for a second I thought maybe I had walked into the wrong place. This wasn't storage. It wasn't a workshop. It wasn't even dusty. It was a shrine. Not to me, not to us, to a life I didn't know existed. The first thing I noticed were the walls plastered floor to ceiling with photographs. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, arranged in careful, obsessive symmetry. Some were faded Polaroids, others were crisp recent prints. And in nearly every single one of them stood the man I thought I had married, but not the version I knew. Not the buttoned-up science professor from Oregon State. Not the man who folded our laundry while humming Sinatra. This man, this version of him wore jeans, loose, worn ones. He had stubble, uncombed hair and a kind of openness in his face that I hadn't seen in over a decade. He looked free, and next to him always was her, a woman, probably 10 years younger than me. Olive skin, deep brown eyes, hair that curled around her face like it belonged in a shampoo commercial. And in every photo she was touching him, his shoulder, his arm, his face. Her hand in his, her body against his. The kind of closeness that didn't need explanation. I could barely breathe. There were beach photos, cabin in the woods selfies, Christmas mornings, a candlelit dinner in Paris. One photo had a timestamp scribbled in the corner, August 2023. I stared at it for a long time. I remembered that day, because on that exact evening I had made lasagna and waited 3 hours for him to come home. He told me he had a late meeting with the university board, and I believed him. I even kept the food warm, but he wasn't in a boardroom. He was in that photo, wrapped in her scarf, laughing beside a boy. And then I saw it. The final piece. A picture of the woman, the man I knew, and a teenager. Maybe 17 or 18. Same chin, same cheekbones, same spark in his eyes. My legs gave out beneath me. I grabbed the edge of a nearby metal table to steady myself. On top of it were papers, neatly stacked folders, financial documents, tax returns, bank wires. Dozens of names I didn't recognize. A few I did. But none matched what I knew of his supposed academic grants or science consortiums. One file was labeled A. Monroe, legal guardianship. Another had a medical record dated 3 months ago. Heart complications, advanced coronary disease. He knew he was dying. He knew, and instead of spending his final months with me, the woman who had held his hand for 16 years, he had spent it with them. His other family. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. The man I had buried 2 weeks ago, the one I wept over, the one whose ashes sat in an urn in my living room, that man was a ghost. A performance. An echo of a version that maybe never existed. How do you mourn someone who never really belonged to you? My fingertips brushed across a small stack of unopened letters on the far corner of the table. They were addressed to her, to Lucia Monroe. The return address was a P.O. box. The handwriting was his. I knew those loops. The capital L that dipped low, the awkward curl of his R's. It was unmistakable. There was one envelope sealed in wax. It had no name on it. Only the words, "For when the truth becomes necessary." And that's when I heard it. A sound. Not from the garage door behind me, but the side entrance creaking open slowly like someone had hoped I wouldn't notice. I turned fast, and standing there partially backlit by the sun outside was the boy from the photo. Tall, athletic build, sharp jawline, and eyes that locked onto mine like he'd been expecting me all along. "Melissa Grant," he asked, voice steady but cautious. I couldn't speak. My throat had closed up. He took a step forward. "I'm sorry to do this now, but I think we need to talk. And if you've ever had a moment where time just stopped, where you knew your life had split into before and after, tell me in the comments. I'm not asking for sympathy. I just want to know I'm not the only one whose world came undone with a whisper." I didn't move. I couldn't. The air inside that garage had shifted, thickened, like it knew this wasn't the worst of it, not yet. The boy, or rather the young man, stood still watching me. His shoulders were tense, but his face, it wasn't hostile. It wasn't even ashamed. He looked like someone who'd come to deliver a truth he didn't want to say aloud. "My name is Caleb Monroe," he said slowly. "I'm Thomas's son." The words landed like a steel door slamming shut inside me. I felt the edges of my vision blur. I wasn't sure if I could trust my own body anymore. My knees locked, breath shallow. "I know this is hard," he added. Hard. He thought this was hard. I had buried a man I loved 2 weeks ago. I had held his urn with shaking hands. I had slept next to his pillow and cried into the collar of his flannel shirt. And now I was staring into the eyes of a stranger who looked like him, exactly like him, but younger, sharper, undeniable. How long, I asked, my voice smaller than I intended. My whole life, he answered, no hesitation. I've always known about you. I staggered back a step. He didn't flinch. My mom, Lucia. She respected the boundaries, he continued. She told me your name but said we weren't supposed to interfere. That my dad wanted to keep things separate. He visited us often, every Thursday. Like clockwork. I swallowed hard. Every Thursday. He used to say Thursday nights were his campus late sessions, some kind of graduate research oversight. And I just kept the oven warm and waited. He told us he was married, Caleb added. He never said anything bad about you. He just said he couldn't leave. That last part stung in a way I wasn't ready for. Couldn't leave. Or wouldn't. He left me every Thursday, I muttered bitterly. Every week. For years. Caleb's face softened. I don't blame you for being angry. But I didn't come here to defend him. I came because he told me if anything ever happened to him, to find you. My head whipped up. What? He reached into his backpack, pulled out a thick envelope with a faded wax seal. He gave this to me 2 weeks before he died, said there would be another will, that the lawyers would give you the official one, but this one, he said, was just in case. I stared at it. The seal wasn't fancy, just pressed with the letter T. I tore it open, hands trembling. Inside was a draft not notarized of a personal will. No lawyer stamp, just Thomas's handwriting. It wasn't a long document. It split assets between legal spouse and acknowledged offspring. My name was listed. So was Caleb's. There was mention of something called Redstone Analytics LLC, a company I'd never heard of. Offshore accounts. Transfers. But one line stopped me cold. Vault access linked to sapphire pendant gifted to M. Grant July 12th. My heart stuttered. That necklace. He had given it to me for our anniversary just 3 nights before the accident. A deep blue sapphire in a silver clasp. I thought it was romantic. Elegant. Now, it was a code. I instinctively touched my collarbone. The necklace wasn't there. I had left it on my nightstand in its velvet box because it felt too heavy to wear after he died. But now it felt heavier in meaning than I could have imagined. What is Redstone Analytics? I asked, my voice brittle. One of his fronts, Caleb said. Private companies. Not on paper. Not public. But that's how he moved money. I blinked. Moved it where? Caleb looked at me. His eyes didn't flinch. International accounts. Some in my name. Some in yours. Some we haven't even traced. There was a pause. Then he added, I think he was protecting us. From people he didn't trust. From people he worked with. I felt the air collapse around me. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a web. A structure. A double life so layered it required shell companies and secret vaults. I turned toward the photographs again now, understanding that each one wasn't just a moment, it was a lie I hadn't caught. A version of him I never met. A family I never knew existed. And yet, the worst part, he still came home to me. He still looked me in the eyes. He still kissed me goodnight. I don't know who he was, I whispered. Not really. Caleb looked down. I'm not sure I did either. If you've ever discovered someone you loved, lived a life behind your back, if you found yourself piecing together a puzzle you never asked to solve, leave a comment below. Tell me how you made it through, because I was just getting started. We left the garage just after noon the next day. I hadn't slept. Not really. My eyes had closed, sure, but my mind never stopped racing. What had Thomas meant by vault access linked to the pendant? What secrets were still locked away, and why did he leave them to me and his son? Correction, his other son. Caleb drove. I sat quietly beside him, the necklace in my palm thumb running over the small groove behind the sapphire. The car was silent except for the hum of the highway stretching between the cracked past and whatever was waiting in downtown Portland. Thomas had called it his satellite office, just a small space he used for meetings with private donors or international faculty. I had never been inside. It was located on the 19th floor of a sleek building nestled between a boutique law firm and a glass-walled fitness center. We rode the elevator up without speaking. When the doors opened, I nearly choked. There was no sign, no receptionist. Just a single brushed metal door and a biometric scanner beside it. Caleb leaned forward and pressed his thumb to the screen. It blinked green. How? I'm listed as co-owner, he said, without looking at me. Of course he was. Inside was sterile, cold. Like someone had decorated an office after Googling the phrase modern executive minimalism. Chrome shelves, concrete gray carpet. A sleek desk with not a single photo, not of me, not of us. No anniversary cards, no framed graduation pictures, nothing. It was a stage, and I didn't have a role in this act. There, Caleb said, pointing to an oversized abstract painting behind the desk. The safe's behind that. I stepped forward, pulled the painting aside on a quiet hinge revealing a biometric pad and a secondary manual lock. I took a shaky breath and pulled the necklace from my coat pocket. Look here, I said, twisting the sapphire between my fingers. A faint click. The gem popped open like a locket inside a microchip no larger than a SIM card. I slid it into the port. The lock released. I expected cash. Maybe gold bars or passports. Something tangible. But what lay inside was worse. There were files, neatly labeled folders containing international wire logs, cryptocurrency transactions, shell company registrations, a black flash drive, a small wooden box, and finally, a single silver key with a tag that read, Federal Trust Bank, Vault 43B. Caleb reached for the documents. These names, these banks, they're all offshore. He wasn't just hiding money. He was moving it constantly. Some of these aren't even legal jurisdictions anymore. I opened the wooden box. Inside was a ring. Not mine. It was gold understated with a single small diamond and an engraving inside 4L always. Lucia. He bought her a ring. Jesus, Caleb muttered, stepping back. He proposed to her. I sank into the desk chair, the cold seeping through me. He wasn't just lying to me. He had promised someone else forever. Maybe even meant it. I looked down at the microchip still in the lock. So much planning, so much precision. And he never once hesitated to kiss me goodnight while she wore that ring on her hand. There was a folded letter beneath the documents. My name on the front in his handwriting. I opened it, hands shaking. Melissa, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I wanted to explain everything while I was still alive, but I couldn't. I was a coward. I built 2 lives, and I loved both of them for different reasons. That's no excuse. Only the truth. You were safety. Lucia was fire. I needed both. But in the end, I hurt everyone. There are things I've left behind. Documents, accounts, leverage. Some are meant to protect you. Others, to warn you. Use them how you choose. You'll know what to do. Forgive me if you can. Thomas. I read it 3 times, my eyes burning. Then I passed it to Caleb. He didn't say anything. We both knew what came next. This wasn't just about heartbreak. This was about danger. Someone, or more likely someone's, was going to want what was in that vault. And if you've ever uncovered a truth so dangerous it made you question your own safety, share your story in the comments below. Let's talk about the moments that force us to grow claws. Because I was done crying, and I was just beginning to sharpen mine. We didn't go home that night. Instead, we went straight to Lindsay's house, my best friend, my compass. She opened the door before we even knocked. I must have looked like a ghost. My fingers still curled tightly around the pendant like it might vanish if I let go. I need a place to think, I whispered. Lindsay didn't ask questions. She just stepped aside, led me to her couch, and brought out a mug of tea. Caleb followed, awkward and silent, as if he wasn't sure if he was allowed in this part of my world. But truth be told, my world had shattered hours ago. He was just one more piece I didn't know where to place. The necklace lay on the coffee table between us, glowing faintly under the lamp. It used to mean something different: anniversary, love, commitment. Now it was a vault key, a digital code, a link to secrets I had no business carrying. I finally told Lindsay everything, from the photos to the safe to the ring, from Caleb to the letter, from Lucia to the other will. She didn't interrupt, didn't gasp, didn't tell me to stop. She just listened, hands folded, eyes wide but unwavering. When I finished, she reached for my hand. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I'm not," I said, surprising even myself. "Not anymore." "What do you mean?" I stared at the sapphire. I'm ready to know the whole truth." The next morning, we drove to the Federal Trust Bank. The silver key from the vault had a number etched into its tag, 43B. We checked in at the front desk, and after verifying my ID against the corporate holding entity listed as Redstone Analytics, the manager nodded and led us to the vault level. It was colder underground. My breath came out in faint clouds. "You'll be alone in the viewing chamber," the manager said, handing me a pair of cotton gloves. Standard protocol. We stepped into a room no larger than a walk-in closet. Concrete walls, steel table. One single safe deposit box slid onto the rails. "Ready?" Caleb asked. "No," I said, but I did it anyway. The key turned smoothly. The drawer slid open. No gold, no cash, no passports, no burner phones. Just one manila folder and a photo. I froze. It was a picture of Thomas standing with 3 men. One was Caleb. The second I recognized from his voice on the phone, Gordon Reed. The third, bald, sharp-suited eyes like polished stone, had to be Victor Hale. They were laughing, arms crossed in front of a black SUV. Not like strangers, not even like partners, like family, like a team. I picked up the manila folder and opened it slowly. Inside were signed contracts, wire logs, fake companies. A page stamped in red, Crane Blackmail Insurance. Caleb leaned in. "That's Victor's real last name. Crane." The final sheet was a handwritten list, initials next to account numbers, and beside VH were large numbers circled twice. "It's not just leverage," I murmured. "It's a loaded gun." I wasn't holding proof of infidelity anymore. I was holding proof of crime. "He kept all of it," Caleb whispered. "Every single piece." My hand shook as I placed the documents back in the box. This wasn't just a dead man's paper trail. It was a time bomb. And now it was mine to hold or to light. There's a certain kind of fear that feels clean, clarifying. It strips you down until all that's left is instinct. And mine said, get help, get protected, get ahead. We didn't go home. We went straight to Marcus Doyle's office. He was a lawyer I hadn't spoken to in years. He handled my father's estate. Honest, blunt, allergic to drama. Perfect. He looked over the folder without flinching. "Just one question. Do you want to go public? Or stay alive?" "I want leverage," I said. "And backup." He nodded. "We'll make 3 copies. One stays here. One goes with you. And one somewhere no one can trace." Lindsay raised her hand. "I know a place." While they scanned, I wrote a letter. One sentence, all caps, right at the bottom of the copied folder. "Try me, MG. If you've ever stood at the edge of something massive, terrifying, and finally felt like you had the upper hand, tell me in the comments. Let's remind each other what it means to own the moment after you've been owned for far too long." Because I wasn't running anymore. I was ready to choose my battlefield. It didn't take long for the first call to come in. Marcus had barely sealed the courier envelope when my phone rang. Unknown number. I didn't answer the first time. Or the second. But the third came just as we were walking out of his office, and this time I let it connect. Melissa Grant. The voice on the other end said, calm and smooth like still water. "This is Gordon Reed. I believe you have something that belongs to me." I stopped walking. Caleb turned toward me instantly, eyes alert. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, careful to keep my voice neutral. Gordon laughed, soft but cold. "Of course you do. The documents from the vault. Some of those pertain to international transfers accounts I helped your husband set up. I didn't respond. I suggest we meet, he added. I'm not meeting anyone. You will, he said, because the others Thomas worked with, they're not as polite as I am. They don't ask. They take. And just like that, he hung up. The line went dead, but my pulse was a drumbeat in my ears. I looked up at Caleb. He knows we've opened the box. Caleb's jaw clenched. That's not all. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded note. Someone else called me last night. Didn't leave a name. But this guy, he did. He unfolded the paper. On it, written in block letters, Victor Crane. He says he's the original investor. The money Thomas moved, he says it was his. I stared at the name. Victor Crane. That was the name on the blackmail insurance document. The man in the photograph. The man who built an empire out of invisible transactions and trusted no one. What did he want? He said. Caleb paused. If we don't return everything by the end of the week, there will be consequences. He didn't elaborate. He didn't have to. I already knew what that meant. And suddenly, the leverage we held didn't feel like a shield. It felt like a spotlight drawing in men who had no intention of letting secrets walk free. What do we do? I asked, my voice thin. We open the rest, Caleb said. There's still that flash drive. We haven't plugged it in. My hands went cold. That flash drive had sat untouched since the day we opened the vault. Small, black, unmarked. It felt heavier than it should, like it was waiting for the right moment. Or daring us. Back at Lindsay's, we gathered in her small den. I sat at the edge of the couch. Caleb hovered behind me. Lindsay placed her hand on my shoulder like an anchor. I inserted the drive. One folder, one file, a video, dated 11 days before Thomas died. I clicked it open. The screen went black for a second, then flickered to life. Thomas. Not the buttoned-up husband I remembered. Not the smiling man with his sleeves rolled at Sunday brunch. This Thomas was different. Haggard, pale, unshaven. His shirt wrinkled, eyes hollow. He looked like a man unraveling. Melissa, he said, staring directly into the camera. If you're watching this, it means I didn't make it. Or maybe I ran out of time. He sighed, rubbed his face. The silence stretched. There's no easy way to say this, so I'll just say it. You were never the one I needed to lie to. You were the one I was trying to protect. But I waited too long. I always waited too long. I bit my lip hard. There's someone you need to be careful with. Someone you trust. Someone I never should have. He leaned forward. It's Julia. The room went completely still. She wasn't a mistake. I need you to know that. But she wasn't innocent either. She planned everything. The pregnancy, the threats, the money. He looked away, then back. I think she killed Lucia. My stomach turned. She said if I left her, she'd go public. Said she'd ruin you. Ruin Caleb. I told her I was ending it. That I was choosing my family. That's when Lucia died. Brakes failed. One car crash. No witnesses. Just gone. Caleb covered his mouth. She knew she was pregnant. Lucia didn't. That changed everything. The video ended there. No goodbye. No apology. Just darkness. I sat there frozen. It wasn't just a betrayal anymore. It was a murder. And Julia, my sister, was at the center of it. If you've ever found yourself betrayed not by a lover, but by blood, by the person you grew up with, trusted, blindly, defended instinctively, please tell me in the comments. Let's make space for those wounds that no one believes until the truth crashes through. Because for me, this wasn't about forgiveness anymore. It was about justice. I stared at the blank screen long after the video ended, trying to piece together the reality I now lived in. My sister, my blood, wasn't just sleeping with my husband. She had orchestrated the entire collapse of my life like a play she'd been directing for years. And now Thomas was dead. Lucia was gone. Caleb had no mother. And I didn't even recognize the reflection in the window anymore. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't break things. Instead, I picked up my phone and texted Julia. Brunch. Just us. I want to talk. Maybe it's time we try to be sisters again. She responded within 2 minutes. Finally, thought you'd never ask. Sunday at 11. I told her I'd bring the tea. That Sunday, she arrived at Lindsay's house in a pale blue wrap dress glowing in the morning sun like nothing had ever happened. Her belly was beginning to show. She cradled it like a trophy. "He kicks when I drink orange juice," she said, laughing lightly as I poured tea into delicate china cups. "Isn't that wild?" I smiled just barely. "You look good, Mel," she added, eyes flickering over me like she was assessing a rival. "Grief suits you." I leaned back in my chair and nodded toward her cup. "Drink. It's chamomile." She sipped once. "So what's this really about?" she asked. I reached into the small box beside me and pulled out the flash drive, placed it gently on the table between us like it was no more dangerous than a sugar cube. Her eyes narrowed. "Thomas left me something," I said quietly, "and now I know everything." Her shoulders stiffened. "Everything. I know about the accounts. About Redstone, about the threats, about Lucia." Julia blinked once, then again. But she didn't move. Didn't reach for the flash drive. Didn't panic. That was always her gift, staying still when everything around her trembled. "You can't prove anything," she said coolly. "I don't have to," I replied. "But you know I know." For a moment she looked small, exposed. The mask slipped. Then she sat up straighter. "What do you want, Melissa? Money, silence, custody of the child?" I shook my head. "I want nothing from you." That startled her. "I'm not going to court. I'm not pressing charges. I'm not playing your game." I continued, my voice steady now. "But if anything happens to me or to Caleb or to anyone else tied to this, that drive goes public. The documents, the letters, the video. Everything." She opened her mouth, closed it. Her lips trembled just slightly. "You think that scares me?" she whispered. "No," I said, "but it will. If you've ever had to look someone you once loved in the eye and promise them you'll burn their world to the ground to protect what's left of yours, tell me in the comments. Let's not pretend that quiet people don't know how to roar. And if you're still with me, still watching, still breathing through every beat of this mess, I want to ask you something. What would you have done? Chosen revenge or walked away? Leave a comment." I read everyone. Because me, I chose neither. I chose power. And that changed everything. I didn't go home after brunch. Even though I had won that round left, Julia rattled, cornered by nothing more than truth and calm. I didn't feel victorious. Not really. I felt wired. Like someone had handed me the final piece of a grenade, and now I had to decide whether to detonate it or bury it. Back at Lindsay's house, I curled up on the worn leather couch, the same couch where I first unspooled the nightmare of my husband's other life. Caleb was in the kitchen, silent as always, eyes fixed on a single point on the floor, like he could burn a hole through it with focus alone. He finally spoke. "She's not going to stop." I looked up. "You mean Julia?" He nodded. "People like that don't stop when you ask nicely. They stop when you make them irrelevant." There was a beat of silence between us. "What does that even mean?" I asked. He pulled out a small black notebook. "My mom, Lucia, she kept everything. Notes, receipts, backup drives, even printed emails. After she died, I went through it all. I thought I was looking for memories." He paused. "Turns out I was looking for leverage." He handed me a photo, one I hadn't seen before. It was Julia dressed in a sharp navy blazer sitting across a dinner table from Victor Crane. Not at a fundraiser, not at a business meeting. In a private booth, 2 champagne flutes, a single candle. Her smile was wide and unmistakably manipulative. "When was this taken?" 2 months before Thomas died. I swallowed hard. She wasn't just a jealous sister. She was playing a long game. Caleb nodded. "And we just interrupted it." I stared at the photo, trying to reconcile the woman I shared bunk beds with as a kid, who painted hearts on my birthday cards, with the version now sitting across from global criminals, pregnant with my husband's child, wearing designer heels she once said she couldn't afford. "Why didn't I see it?" I whispered. "Because you loved her," he said simply, and love makes you blind. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake with the flash drive in my hand and Thomas's voice replaying in my mind. Use them how you see fit. Burn them, bury them, or expose it all. I wasn't ready to burn it, but I wasn't burying it either. I needed a plan. The next morning, I called Marcus. I want a legal affidavit, I said. For what? If anything happens to me, anything, you release the contents of the flash drive to the press and to every regulatory office in this country. There was a pause on the line. Then, understood. By noon it was done, sealed, signed, stored in 3 separate safety deposit boxes, one in my name, one in Caleb's, and one in Lindsay's, under an alias no one could trace. And just like that, the rules shifted. Now we weren't just holding secrets, we were the threat. If you've ever had to shift from defense to offense, to stop asking why someone hurt you and start deciding what to do about it, share your story. This isn't just my fight anymore, it's about what we do with the pieces we're left holding. Because sometimes survival isn't enough. Sometimes we build something better from the ruins. The day after we secured the affidavits, we drove to Savannah. It wasn't part of the original plan, but when Caleb remembered a name his mother had mentioned once, a man who had been close to Thomas in college, something clicked. His name was Edward Holloway. According to Lucia, he was the only one who ever told Thomas the truth, even when it hurt. He lived in a brick house covered in ivy on a quiet street that looked frozen in time. A weathered piano sat in the front window. The door creaked when it opened. "You're Melissa?" he asked before I even said a word. "And you must be Caleb." We nodded. "I was told to expect you," he said simply, and stepped back to let us in. The living room smelled like paper and pipe smoke. Books lined the shelves. Everything felt still. Safe. He returned from the back room carrying a sealed envelope. His hand shook slightly as he offered it to me. He said to only give this to you both together. I took the envelope. It was heavy. Inside was a second will, and everything changed. Unlike the first, this one was legally formatted, typed, witnessed. It named Caleb as an heir, but it also included a line that hadn't appeared in any other document. To the unborn child of Julia Grant, I leave 25% of all offshore private savings held in trust until their 21st birthday. Not to Julia, to the child. I felt the blood drain from my face. He planned for this, I murmured. Even this. Why would he trust the baby? I asked Edward, but not the mother. He looked at me with steady eyes. Because he knew what Julia was, and what the child could become. Caleb leaned back in his chair. This means she has no legal access to that money. No way to touch it. I nodded slowly, not without a fight. Edward tilted his head. And if she tries? I reached into my bag, pulled out the flash drive, and placed it on the table. Then we use this. Edward exhaled through his nose. That's leverage. That word had become our lifeline. Not anger, not revenge, not justice. Leverage. Because you can't always punish people for what they've done, but you can make sure they never get to do it again. That evening, we returned to Charleston with a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't about protecting ourselves anymore. It was about protecting what Thomas should have protected. His son, his unborn child, and maybe unintentionally, me. We knew Victor Crane wouldn't stop. Gordon Reed wouldn't stop. But we had names now. Dates, contracts, blackmail insurance. And every step they took toward us only backed them further into a corner. Sometimes survival means building a wall. Sometimes it means showing your enemies that you are the wall. And if you've ever had to protect something bigger than yourself, even when you were breaking, leave a comment. Tell me what gave you strength. Let's remind each other that silence isn't always safety. Because for the first time since Thomas died, I didn't feel like a widow anymore. I felt like a force. We had leverage. We had documents, photos, timelines, transfers enough to drown Crane and Reed in a swamp of their own making. But we still didn't know who else was out there. Thomas had built a fortress of secrets, and every new revelation felt like opening a door to another hallway. So we did the only thing left to do. We went to the bank. Federal Trust was a discreet institution, a place hidden in plain sight between a historic inn and a boutique stationery store in downtown Charleston. You wouldn't look at it twice if you didn't know what you were looking for. But behind those quiet walls were vaults that held more than money. They held legacies and secrets. Lindsay stayed in the car. If anything feels off, she told me, text me one word: crash. I nodded, slipped the silver key into my pocket, and followed Caleb into the marble-lined lobby. We gave them the key and my ID. A long pause followed. The vault manager frowned, checking a screen. "It's been years," he muttered, then glanced at us again. "Registered under Mercury South Holdings. We'll escort you down." We passed through 2 layers of security before we reached the vault. The hallway narrowed as the air turned colder, the silence thicker. They left us alone with the box. I took a breath, turned the key, slid it open. Inside, no stacks of cash, no jewels, no weapons. Just one thin manila folder and a single photo. The photo was damning. It showed Thomas standing beside Gordon Reed and Victor Crane, arms crossed in front of a matte black SUV. Caleb stood off to the side, younger, maybe 15. Everyone was laughing. But what made my chest seize was what sat behind them, a small shipping container, its side, marked in bold Crane International Freight. Confidential. We'd heard of that company before. It was one of the corporate shells listed in the Redstone documents. The photo was time-stamped 5 years ago. It wasn't business. It was operation. I opened the folder. Inside, contracts signed by Thomas, Gordon, and Crane. Wire instructions to accounts in the Caymans, Belize, and Zurich, and one final document circled in red ink. Crane Blackmail Insurance. This wasn't just leverage. This was a weapon. Thomas hadn't just left a mess. He had left us the blueprint to destroy it all. And now I understood. He didn't die with secrets. He died preparing a shield, or maybe a torch. "Why didn't he use this?" I whispered. Caleb looked down. "Because he was still trying to protect her. Julia. Even after everything." I nodded slowly. But I wasn't Thomas. I had no illusions left. We left the vault with the folder locked tight in a briefcase. Back in Lindsay's car, we drove in silence, each of us calculating how to use what we'd found. But in the quiet, I felt something I hadn't felt since the first key turned in that old garage. Clarity. If you've ever held the truth in your hands and had to decide what it was worth, drop a comment below. Because sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. It arms you. We didn't wait long to act. After what we found in the vault, waiting felt like handing our enemies more time, more chances to strike first. I called Marcus from the car and told him everything. Within 24 hours, we were in his office again. Me, Caleb, and Lindsay seated across from stacks of documents, 2 external hard drives, and 3 unmarked manila folders. Marcus had already started scanning everything: the blackmail papers, the offshore account listings, the Shell Corporation ownerships, and of course the photo. "This isn't just evidence," he said, eyes skimming the pages. "It's a map. A map to what I asked, though I already knew the answer. To the whole operation," Marcus said. "They built this thing with military precision. Every signature, every transaction, it all lines up. And more importantly, it all ties back to Gordon Reed and Victor Crane." He paused, looking straight at me. "You realize what this means?" I nodded. "That we have the power to destroy them." "No," he said. "You have the power to stop them from ever touching you again." And that felt better than revenge. So we got to work. Marcus digitized every file and uploaded them to 3 separate encrypted cloud accounts. One under his control, one for Caleb, and one anonymously sent to a 4th party, someone Lindsay knew from her journalism days. "Just in case," she said. "Because paranoia isn't crazy when they really are watching." I sat across from them, all quiet, folding and refolding the same piece of paper, Thomas's handwritten note to me from the vault. His words echoed with each breath. "Use them how you see fit." And I had made my decision. "I want to send a message," I said. "Not to the police. Not yet. I want to look them in the eye and let them know I'm not afraid anymore." Marcus considered that. A soft threat. A clear one. He helped me draft a single-page letter. No accusations, no demands, just one sentence handwritten at the bottom. Try me, MG. We sent copies to the corporate office of Reed and Hale Capital and to a private mailbox linked to Victor Crane's known business aliases. Within 2 hours, my phone rang. Blocked number. I picked up. "You think you're clever?" a voice hissed. It was Gordon. I recognized the smugness in his tone, but now it sounded tight, pressured, fraying. "You're in over your head." "No," I said calmly. "You are." There was silence. Then a short, bitter laugh. "What do you want?" "Nothing," I replied. "Just silence. No more calls. No more threats. You touch me or anyone I care about, and every document, every transfer, every signature goes public." "You don't want that kind of trouble," he warned. I took a breath. "I already have that kind of trouble. The difference is, I'm not afraid of it anymore." He hung up. If you've ever stood up to someone who thought they owned your silence, share it in the comments. Whether it was a partner, a boss, a parent, or a threat in a tailored suit, your courage matters. And if you're watching this right now from somewhere quiet, heart-pounding, wondering if you'd have the strength, maybe this is your sign. Maybe today you stop whispering. Because that day, I stopped whispering too. In the weeks that followed, a strange quiet settled over everything. No more anonymous calls. No more warnings. Julia didn't reach out, and Crane vanished from every contact list we could track. Even Reed's offices went dark. Phones, disconnected websites down for renovation. On the surface, it looked like everything was calming down. But I didn't trust silence anymore. Because silence wasn't peace. It was strategy. And so while the world around us held its breath, I began rebuilding mine. It started with Caleb. He moved into Lindsay's spare room, though we both knew it was temporary. The bond between us, once held together by shared pain, was now something more durable. We cooked dinner together, talked about his mom, about Thomas. Sometimes we laughed. Sometimes we just sat in silence, knowing that not everything had to be spoken aloud. Then came the decision about Thomas's estate. After all that had happened, I had a legal right to most of it, what wasn't frozen, buried offshore, or tied to shell companies. But claiming it felt like swallowing ash. Every dollar was soaked in betrayal. So I met with a nonprofit organization Lucia once supported, a fund that helped victims of white-collar crime rebuild their lives. I transferred $2 million of Thomas's remaining assets to the fund under her name. Not because I wanted to be noble, but because I wanted something good to grow from something so foul. The rest I kept. Not out of greed, but because I'd earned it through fire. And because I needed it to protect Caleb's future and mine. One afternoon, I received a letter from Julia. It was handwritten, 2 pages. She didn't apologize. She didn't deny anything either. She just said, "I thought I was the one being left behind. I thought if I could take what you had, maybe I'd finally be the one chosen." I folded the letter and placed it in the back of a drawer. It didn't deserve a reply. Some ghosts are better left unanswered. Instead, I focused on healing. I picked up my camera again, a hobby I'd abandoned years ago. I started walking each morning with Lindsay, letting the rhythm of the pavement anchor me. I planted lavender by the windowsill and left the garage key hanging on a hook by the door. The garage was still there, untouched. But now it wasn't a graveyard of secrets. It was a monument to survival. And survival, I'd learned, isn't about what you endure. It's about what you build once the storm passes. If you've ever walked away from the wreckage of a life you didn't choose and tried to build something new, tell me about it. Let's share those beginnings. Because the world needs more stories of quiet strength. Sometimes the loudest victories are the ones no one sees. And I was ready to live mine. Spring came early that year. The azaleas bloomed along the Charleston sidewalks like they were rushing to meet something new. I stood on the front porch of my new home, yes, my home, watching the light fall over the steps. It was smaller than the old house. No sweeping staircase, no grand foyer, but it was mine, chosen, earned. Caleb had just finished his college applications. We'd spent 2 weeks reviewing his personal essay, one he wrote about identity and shadows and legacy, without ever once naming names. It was brilliant, raw, his. He'd come through the fire with edges, but also a kind of calm wisdom most adults never find. Lindsay had started working on a feature article not about me, not directly, but about financial predators and the myth of the good family. She said I inspired it. I said I wasn't ready to read it. We laughed. One Saturday, I got a text from an unknown number. "Heard you're still standing. That's cute." I didn't flinch. I screenshotted it, sent it to Marcus, blocked the number. Then I went back to my tea. Because I'd already played the game, and I'd already won not by destroying them, but by refusing to let them rewrite who I was. Later that day, Julia showed up. No warning, no call. She just walked up the driveway bellyful and nearly due. She wore sunglasses and too much perfume, like she still needed armor. "I'm not here to fight," she said. I needed to see if you were really okay." I looked at her for a long moment. "You didn't ask about Caleb," I said quietly. She looked down. "No, I thought you loved him once." "I did," she whispered. "But I loved being chosen more." There it was, the truth plain and hollow. She started to turn away, but I stopped her. "That child inside you, I don't blame them. I never will. But I will protect them, even if it's from you." Her eyes glistened. Maybe from guilt. Maybe just the wind. "You'll never have to protect them from me," she said, "because you already scared the hell out of everyone who might." I watched her walk away, and this time I didn't feel anger, just clarity. Some endings aren't dramatic, they're just quiet, and sometimes that's the mercy. If you've ever stood at the edge of forgiveness and chosen your peace instead, say it out loud in the comments. Let someone else feel less alone. We don't all get apologies, but we can give ourselves closure. And if you're still watching, still walking this path with me, take a second right now. Where are you? What time is it? Let me know in the comments, because I promise you, your story matters too. This isn't just about what I lost. It's about what I became, and who I'll never be again. 2 months later, the baby was born. Julia didn't tell me herself. I found out through a quiet message from one of Thomas's former assistants, a woman I barely remembered from a charity gala years ago. "It's a boy," she wrote. "Healthy." She named him Theodore. "Thought you should know." I stared at that message for a long time, unsure how I felt. Anger didn't rise. Sadness didn't come. Just stillness. Like the sound after a storm when even the birds don't sing. Theodore. A name Thomas once said he liked back when we still talked about future children with innocent hearts. The irony of it made me exhale a dry half-laugh. I didn't respond. Instead, I printed the message and folded it carefully into the back of a photo album I'd been building. Not of Thomas, not of Julia, but of Caleb, his mother, me. The people who chose love even when it cost them. One evening, Caleb stood in the doorway with a box in his arms. "What's that?" I asked. He smiled. "Something we forgot about." Inside were old videotapes, family trips, birthday parties. One in particular caught my breath. Caleb, maybe 6 years old, in a pirate costume chasing a balloon, while Thomas filmed laughing behind the camera. I hadn't heard that laugh in over a year. We sat on the floor watching it together. Caleb was quiet, but his eyes never left the screen. And when it ended, he whispered, "I think part of him really did love us, even if he was too broken to protect us." I nodded. Love isn't always enough, but sometimes it's a start. The next day, I wrote a letter. Not to Julia, not to Crane, but to Theodore. "Dear Theo, you don't know me yet, but one day when the time is right, someone will tell you about me. They may twist it, they may hide it, but I want you to know one thing. You were born into a storm, but you are not the storm. You are the quiet afterward, the healing, the reason we fought." I sealed the letter in an envelope and stored it in the same safety box where the original documents had once lived. Maybe one day he'd read it. Maybe not. But it mattered that I wrote it. Because legacy isn't just money or land or secrets. It's the truth we leave behind for those who come after. If you've ever had to accept that some people won't get what they deserve but you still chose to leave something good behind, tell me below. What did you leave? A lesson. A letter. A boundary. And if you're still here, still walking beside me in this story, thank you. Let me know where you're listening from or what time it is as you hear this. These small connections, they're how we build something real from what was broken. Because in the end, it's not revenge that lasts. It's resilience. I didn't go back to the garage for almost a year, not because I was afraid, but because some places deserve silence before being seen again. It sat there quietly nestled behind the house. Thomas left me a structure filled with ghosts and echoes. But now the ghosts didn't haunt me. They listened. When I finally walked back in, the air was different. Not heavy, not sharp. Just still. The dust had settled. The same workbench stood in the corner. The cabinets hadn't moved. But something had shifted. Maybe it was me. I stood in the center, turned a slow circle, and whispered, "I'm still here." Because I was not broken, not bitter, just whole. Caleb joined me a few minutes later. He carried a large canvas, freshly stretched and blank. "Thought this space could be used for something else," he said. "Maybe something that starts with us." We didn't speak about what had been. Not the files, the vaults, or the betrayals. We'd already lived them. What we talked about was what came next. A community center. It started as a joke. A throwaway idea Caleb mentioned one night over pizza. Wouldn't it be wild if this place became something good? But then, we kept talking. What if it offered workshops for teens? Basic financial literacy? Small engine repair? How to spot financial abuse? What if it could become a haven? That week we filed the paperwork. The Lucia Center opened 6 months later, named after his mother. Funded partially by what we recovered and partially by donations that poured in once our story quietly made its way through certain circles. We never told the whole truth. We didn't need to. What mattered was that people heard just enough to believe in the mission. The ribbon cutting was small. No press, no speeches. Just a handful of people who knew what it meant to start over. We planted a single olive tree in the courtyard. Lindsay whispered, "Symbol of peace." I smiled, and stubborn roots. Julia never showed up again. But once anonymously we received a donation, $10,000, no note, no sender. Just a transaction log with the reference for Theo's tomorrow. I didn't need to ask who sent it. Some people never say I'm sorry, but sometimes they say it with actions. If you've ever taken pain and turned it into purpose, if you've ever dared to plant something in the soil of your worst day, leave your mark. Comment, share. Let someone know it's possible. Because here's what I've learned. You don't have to win to heal. You just have to begin. And I began again right where everything ended. Right here in a quiet garage with new walls, new hope, and no more secrets. Some endings don't come with thunder. No dramatic final scene. No applause. Just the quiet exhale of a life finally lived on your own terms. It's been over a year since everything unraveled, since the lies surfaced, since the names fell, since the man I thought I knew became a memory shaped by shadows. And yet, in that time, I've learned that grief doesn't just mourn what was lost. It also makes room for what can still be born. The Lucia Center runs 3 days a week now. Caleb teaches one of the youth program's basic financial literacy with the kind of heart only someone who's known exploitation can bring. Lindsay published her feature. Quietly, it went viral. People reached out. Survivors, whistleblowers, daughters, sons, strangers who had stories they were too afraid to tell until they knew someone else had survived the silence. As for me, I wake up to morning light, not secrets. I drink my coffee slowly. I keep a photo of Lucia and Caleb beside the front door. And sometimes when I'm feeling brave, I pull out that letter I wrote to Theo and read it back. reminding myself that resilience isn't just what we rise from, but what we choose to rise toward. So if you followed this story to the end, I want to say this, not just as a narrator, but as someone who has lived it. You're not alone. If you believe in second chances, in quiet strength, in the right to live free of manipulation, subscribe and stay. Leave a comment. Share your story. Let this be the start of your healing too. Because we don't just survive the fire, we rebuild in its light.